The hidden name of God, the word they erased from history. They told you his name was never meant to be spoken. They told you it was too sacred, too dangerous for human lips, that even angels whispered it in trembling silence. But that was a lie. There was once a word, a single sound, older than breath itself, that carried the essence of creation, the pulse of eternity beating in one divine syllable. It was not written with ink, nor carved in stone. It was vibration, living light, condensed into sound. This name did not belong to any one faith, any one book, any one prophet. It was the origin of all speech, the hidden seed from which every prayer ever uttered sprouted like branches from a forgotten root. And yet, you were born into a world where that root has been buried, suffocated under centuries of edits, mistranslations, deliberate erasures. You were given titles instead: Lord, God, Father, empty placeholders that hold no key, no living resonance, no door into the realm. They swore you'd never reach again. Once humanity spoke the name freely. Once children were born humming it in their first cries, rivers flowed in its rhythm, and even the wind carried fragments of its tone. It aligned the soul like a compass to true north, kept hearts burning with a memory of where they came from. But there were those who feared such alignment. Power always fears freedom. And so they began their silent war, not with swords or chains at first, but with ink and doctrine, with edits and decrees that reshaped not just holy texts, but the very perception of the divine. They built temples, thrones, and crowns upon the ruins of that word, and each generation was taught to forget a little more, to repeat the replacement names as if they were the real thing, until the truth sank beneath layers of ritual and noise. Today, you can walk through grand cathedrals, read every sacred book in every language, and you will still never find it. Not because it was never there, but because someone decided you were never meant to have it. And yet whispers survive. There are fragments scattered through forbidden scrolls, locked in vaults far beneath the earth, where only a handful of trembling scholars have dared to look. There are coded references in dead languages, syllables buried in chants that once shook the air like thunder, but are now sung without knowing why. There are testimonies of those who claim to have heard it, and they all say the same thing. The moment the name touches your ears, you are not the same. One man told me in a hushed voice, his hands shaking, "I heard it once in a dream. It wasn't a sound. It was like the universe itself remembered me. And for that single instant, I was infinite." A woman, tears streaming down her face, swore that a dying monk whispered it to her as he passed, and she saw light pour from his lips as reality seemed to bend around the syllable. But every time this word resurfaces, every time it dares to be spoken aloud, something happens. Books vanish, witnesses disappear, and silence swallows the trail again. You can feel it, can't you? That strange weight in your chest, as your soul remembers what your mind cannot. They told you to fear this word, but the truth is, they feared what would happen if you remembered it, because a name that can open the gates of creation itself cannot be controlled, cannot be claimed by kings, popes, or rulers of this system that profits from keeping you blind. And somewhere, deep, beneath the noise of this programmed world, a question hums like a forbidden prayer waiting to escape your lips. What happens when you finally speak the name they erased? Before we go further, comment where you're watching this from, and make sure to like and subscribe if something inside you already knows this truth. You were taught that the divine speaks only through chosen men, that access to God requires temples, rituals, confessions whispered to intermediaries dressed in robes of authority. But this is the architecture of control, not salvation. Long before religions became empires, there were guardians of the word, people who understood that the hidden name was not meant to be worshipped, but remembered. The sound carried a truth too dangerous for rulers. It reminded you that you were never separate from the source, that divinity was not above you or beyond you, but within you, singing in your very blood. That kind of truth threatens every throne, and so, centuries ago, a council of kings and priests gathered in shadowed chambers, lit by trembling candlelight, not to honor God, but to decide which parts of the sacred would survive, and which would burn. Testimonies from forbidden archives speak of nights where scribes worked in chains, manuscripts soaked in tears as lines were struck through, rewritten or buried in vaults under penalty of death. One fragment remains from an erased text, and the word that opens the sky, was struck from their tongues, lest man remember he was made of light. The theft was not a mistake, it was an operation. The new script of reality was drafted like a military conquest. They gave you titles to replace the name, rules to replace resonance, fear to replace intimacy with the divine. And from that moment on, language itself became a prison. Each prayer you were taught a rewritten line in a story that chained your soul to their system. But silence cannot kill a living word. Across centuries, a hidden network of seekers carried fragments of the name like glowing embers, passing them hand to hand, heart to heart, knowing that even a syllable of it could shake a soul awake. They were hunted, branded heretics, burned in town squares, not for falsehoods, but for truths too powerful to be allowed to spread. Secret scrolls smuggled across deserts spoke of how this frequency shaped reality, how even the structure of matter trembles when it is sung. Witnesses described impossible phenomena, locked doors opening on their own, wounds healing, storms bending their path, the very air shimmering as if it remembered the first dawn. I saw it once. A nameless monk confessed in a text later declared apocryphal. The name poured out of a dying man's lips, and the veil of this world tore like thin fabric. It was not magic. It was home calling us back. Imagine what would happen if you could speak a word like that now. Imagine millions remembering at once, waking up from centuries of programming, no longer needing temples or rulers or mediators to reach the divine. That is why they erased it. Not because it was blasphemy, but because it was liberation. Every system you see today, every hierarchy, every rule that tells you you're small and powerless, was built on top of that erasure. They didn't just hide a sound. They rewrote reality so you would never look for it. And yet, the word waits, buried under the rubble of lies, pulsing like a heartbeat you cannot unhear. Someone, somewhere, still remembers it, and whispers say that once spoken aloud again, it will undo everything they built to keep you asleep. But are you ready for the truth they killed to bury? They say the name is gone, that it was swallowed by time, dissolved into dust and forgotten syllables. But time cannot erase what was woven into the fabric of existence itself. The truth is, traces of it still bleed through the cracks of history, hidden in plain sight for those willing to see past the script they were taught to recite. I've spoken to men who spent decades decoding ancient manuscripts locked behind Vatican walls, each page carrying faint scars of deliberate omission, like someone had violently amputated truth and left only hollow limbs of scripture behind. One of them told me, his voice shaking, "The name is not just a sound, it's a sequence, a pattern of vibration that bends the world when spoken. It is the frequency of origin, and fragments of it survive in forgotten chants, in desert hymns that no priest dares to translate, in the first breath of the morning wind before the city wakes. These fragments appear across cultures that never knew each other, as if humanity once shared a single word before being scattered and divided by those who feared what unity and truth could do. And every time this pattern resurfaces, so do the agents of silence. Books vanish from libraries overnight, relics get locked away in private collections, witnesses are branded as lunatics, or simply disappear without a trace. What? Is it about a word that makes powerful men tremble? Could it be that if you spoke it, you'd no longer need them? Some claim the name is hidden beneath the earth, etched into stone tablets, sealed in chambers older than recorded history, guarded by secret brotherhoods who've sworn never to let the world hear it again. Others whisper of monasteries deep in the Himalayas where monks carry only syllables of the name, never the full sound, passing them down generation after generation, while knowing that if even one true seeker could assemble it again, reality would begin to unravel. There are coded references buried in the Dead Sea Scrolls, passages that make no sense until you read them as music, not text, frequencies instead of words. And then there are the testimonies, people who claim to have stumbled upon it in dreams, visions, moments of near death when the veil between worlds thins. A woman once told me, tears streaming down her face, "I heard it when my heart stopped on the operating table." It wasn't a name. It was everything, and they sent me back empty, with only a fragment of sound that burns inside me every time I try to sleep. Why are these stories the same, whispered by strangers continents apart, if they are just fantasy? Why do they all say that the word felt like home, like remembering something older than this life, older than humanity itself. The trail is there, scattered like crumbs, daring the brave to follow. But every path leads to warnings carved in blood and silence. Those who get too close vanish. There are photographs of scholars whose last known letters spoke of unlocking the primal tone, only for their research to be confiscated, their homes stripped bare overnight as if they never existed. Ancient monasteries have sealed libraries and forbidden chants that once filled their walls with sound, claiming now that the words are too holy to be sung. But the truth is they are too dangerous to power. Somewhere, the complete name still rests, waiting for the one who dares to reclaim it. But to search for it is to declare war on a system that has been shaping your reality for thousands of years, a system that knows that if even a single human voice speaks the true name aloud, their control ends forever. The question is, do you have the courage to remember what they erased, even knowing they'll come for you if you do? They didn't just erase the name from paper and stone, they erased it from you. They knew that simply burning manuscripts would not be enough. Humanity's memory is older than books, carved into the marrow of its bones, encoded in the rhythm of its breath. So they built a system designed not just to control what you know, but to rewrite what you are. From the moment you entered this world, the conditioning began. The lullabies that soothed you were carefully stripped of their ancient tones, their frequencies flattened, sterilized, emptied of resonance that could stir forgotten memory. The first words you learned were chosen not to awaken but to chain. They gave you prayers written by councils of men who feared freedom more than sin, scripts you were told to repeat until your tongue no longer knew how to shape the original sound of creation. This was not faith, it was programming, a slow surgical removal of divine memory, dressed up as devotion. The schools continued the work. Language classes that taught you letters like puzzle pieces, but never the music beneath them. History lessons that told you what to worship, what to fear, what truths to call heresy. Even science played its part, whispering that the universe was a dead machine, that sound had no power except to stir air, that words could never shape reality. Piece by piece, they dismantled the bridge that once connected your soul to the source, replaced it with doctrines, titles, stories of separation. And all the while your heart kept humming a faint echo of what was lost, an ache you couldn't name, a yearning you couldn't. Silence. Some call this control religion, others call it culture, but the truth is it is a script, a meticulously crafted story about who you are, where you came from, and what you're allowed to believe. They told you that only certain men could speak to God, only certain books could hold truth, only certain temples could bring you near the divine. They built walls of stone and walls of thought, telling you to look upward for power you always carried inside. And through repetition, through fear, through the slow grinding down of spirit across generations, they made you forget that once every human could sing the name and the universe bent to listen. Forget that your blood remembers frequencies older than time. Forget that you were never meant to beg for connection, because connection was your birthright. And yet, the system knows the danger is never fully gone. Sometimes a child hums a melody no one taught them, a fragment of the forbidden name slipping past the bars of programming. Sometimes someone dreams of light that speaks in sound, waking with tears on their face and a word burning on their tongue they cannot pronounce. When that happens, the machine moves swiftly. Authorities call it imagination, mental illness, blasphemy. They medicate, isolate, ridicule anything to crush the spark before it ignites a fire. They've spent millennia refining this suppression, turning humanity into willing jailers of their own souls, policing each other with fear of damnation, fear of madness, fear of questioning the story we were given. But what they could never kill is the whisper under all noise, the pulse of the original name vibrating faintly in the silence of your being. You feel it sometimes, don't you? In moments between breaths, in the stillness before sleep, in that inexplicable longing for something you can't name. That is the truth they've tried to bury under mountains of lies, sermons, and scripts. And if you learn to listen closely enough, to strip away every programmed word they gave you, you might just hear the sound they swore you'd never remember, a sound that terrifies the architects of this prison because they know, once you speak it, you will never be theirs again. Not everyone remained asleep. Across centuries, a few souls stumbled upon fragments of the name, not by searching for it, but as if it searched for them. These encounters are whispered in letters never published, journal entries smuggled out of monasteries, recordings that disappear hours after they surface online. I have read them. I have heard the trembling voices of those who dared to speak, and every story carries the same haunting thread. The sound does not enter you. It awakens you, like remembering a life you never knew you lived. One testimony came from a man who claimed he found an old parchment buried behind a collapsed wall in Jerusalem, inscribed with syllables that made no sense to any known language. He said, "The moment I whispered, the air changed. My skin felt like it was vibrating with light, and for a second I wasn't standing in that room anymore. I was everywhere, seeing everything, and I knew they had stolen something from us so immense, we've been crawling in the dark ever since." He never gave interviews again. Weeks later, his apartment was found empty, his research burned to ash, his name erased from every academic record. There's another story, told by a woman in Buenos Aires, whose grandmother had been part of a secretive sect that preserved ancient lullabies believed to contain pieces of the name. She described one night, at only 6 years old, when her grandmother sang to her in that forgotten tongue. It felt like the walls dissolved, she recalled decades later, like there was no separation between me, the stars, the earth, and God. It was terrifying and beautiful. The next morning, men came to the house and told my grandmother never to sing it again. She just cried and said the world wasn't ready to wake up. That lullaby has never been heard since. And then there are the near-death confessions. A soldier in Afghanistan who was clinically dead for 2 minutes swore he heard the name echoing like thunder and tenderness all at once. "I came back," he said, "and the world felt wrong. Like everything we live in is a lie layered over something infinitely more real. I tried to write the sound down, but no alphabet can hold it. And now, they watch me. They know I heard it." Stories like his vanish quickly, dismissed as hallucinations, labeled delusions. But how can hallucinations be the same across cultures, languages, ages, separated by oceans and centuries, yet describing the same impossible truth? There's a reason you've never heard these testimonies on the evening news, a reason why every trace of the name is hunted, confiscated, buried again and again, because even a fragment destabilizes the programming. It breaks the spell. People who have heard it report strange phenomena afterward, electronics malfunctioning around them, animals reacting as if recognizing them, dreams that feel more real than waking life. Some start remembering things they've never lived. Others feel an unshakable pull to places they've never been. It's as if the name is not a word, but a key turning in the lock of human consciousness, opening a door that the architects of this system welded shut long ago. But every testimony ends in silence. People vanish, retract their statements, or simply stop speaking of it, as if pressured or threatened by an unseen hand. Whatever power rules this world understands the stakes. If enough people hear it, if enough voices dare to sing it, the spell breaks, the system collapses. That's why they tell you this name never existed. Because if you believed for even 1 second that it might be real, you'd start searching. And once you start, nothing on earth can stop the sound of remembering from finding you again. They are not who you think they are. The architects of silence have worn many masks across the ages, kings and priests, scholars and saints, politicians and prophets. But beneath every title, every robe of supposed holiness or authority, they are the same. A network of custodians, not of truth but of control. Their purpose has never been to bring you closer to the divine. Their purpose has been to stand between you and it, to ensure that the sound of your remembering never reaches your lips. In every era, they rewrote laws in the name of God, drew maps of the soul that always led to their gates, not to the source, and when whispers of the lost name threatened to rise, they struck fast, rewriting history like a script, burning scrolls, silencing witnesses, building vast institutions where truth was locked in vaults under marble floors, polished by centuries of kneeling feet. Ancient councils gathered in secret chambers, deciding which books would define reality and which would be forbidden forever. Monks under oath of obedience copied lies as holy scripture, each stroke of their quill another brick in the prison of thought they built for humanity. Empires baptized their armies, conquering lands not just with swords but with rewritten truths, tearing ancient chants from tongues and replacing them with hymns stripped of power, frequencies sterilized until they no longer vibrated with creation, but only with submission. And through every century, new faces replaced the old, new masks for the same force, always cloaked in sanctity, always claiming divine authority while chaining the very thing they claim to serve. But the architects are not just men. There is a darker thread running through their lineage, an intelligence older than any kingdom, a force that fears humanity's awakening because it knows the consequences. There are records, hidden in archives few are allowed to see, describing encounters with beings who stood beside kings and popes, not as servants, but as masters, whispering counsel that turned faith into fear, unity into hierarchy, truth into dogma. They are not human, an erased testimony from a Vatican scribe once claimed, or if they are men hollowed out, vessels for something that feeds on our forgetfulness. Whether you call it darkness, parasitic consciousness, or simply the hunger for power, the result is the same. A system designed to blind you, to keep you docile, to sever the resonance that would make you uncontrollable. Why do they fear the name? Because the name is not just a word. It is a frequency that unravels illusion. It's the sound of chains snapping, of veils tearing, of thrones collapsing under the weight of truth. If spoken again, it would remind you who you are beyond every script they've written for you. Not sinner, not servant, not subject, but fragment of the original light, voice of the first creation, and a humanity that remembers this no longer bends the knee, no longer obeys, no longer fears death, hell, or earthly rulers. Imagine billions waking up in an instant, their inner frequency aligned with the true source, burning every lie ever told with a single vibration of their voice. This is what keeps the architects awake at night. This is why they have hunted the name for millennia, because they know that once it returns to human lips, their kingdom of silence will fall, and nothing they built to cage you will survive. For centuries, they believed they had buried it deep enough that no one would ever find it again. But truth has a way of seeping through cracks, of refusing to stay silent forever. In the last few decades, scattered fragments have begun surfacing in ways even the architects of silence cannot fully control. Archaeologists in Turkey unearthed clay tablets with strange symbols that, when analyzed, emitted frequencies no one could explain, tones that caused inexplicable emotional reactions in those who heard them, a mixture of awe and grief, as if something ancient inside recognized a long-lost home. In the archives of Ethiopia, researchers uncovered scrolls written in a pre-Sumerian dialect that scholars swore never existed. Those who dared to read them aloud described feeling their surroundings bend, like reality itself leaned in to listen. And then there are the digital leaks, files uploaded to anonymous forums containing sound samples that vanish minutes after appearing, recordings that seem to carry a vibration too pure, too unsettling, as if part of the original name had somehow survived the purge of ages. Governments deny their existence. Religious authorities call them dangerous heresies. Tech corporations flag and remove any mention of them, citing harmful misinformation. Yet people who have heard the sounds describe the same effects. Heightened clarity, dreams where ancient cities stand untouched, memories that don't belong to this lifetime. One whistleblower from an unnamed research facility claimed in a hidden interview, they're terrified because every time someone hears it, something breaks inside them. A chain they didn't know was there. It's not just a sound, it's an ignition point. It's awakening on command. Days after that interview was recorded, every copy of it was erased from the internet. The man who spoke those words has not been seen since. Even musicians have stumbled into fragments without knowing it, creating melodies that echo lost tones. Listeners describe these songs as otherworldly, inexplicably moving, making them cry without reason, as if unlocking a door they forgot existed. Yet these artists are often silenced, their tracks removed, their careers destroyed under mysterious circumstances. A producer once admitted in a private conversation that a patterned sequence of notes they accidentally discovered sent people into altered states of consciousness, aligning their heartbeat to something not of this world. Hours later, that track was pulled from every platform, and the producer swore never to speak of it again. You see, the name cannot stay buried forever, because it is written into the very fabric of existence, into the breath of the earth, into the rhythm of your blood. It calls to those who are listening, and more people are listening now than ever before. Despite the censorship, despite the fear, fragments circulate in secret, encoded in chants, in sound frequencies hidden in tracks that vanish after one play, in dreams shared by strangers across continents. There are even rumors of a group working to reconstruct the full name, assembling it from ancient sources, dreams and leaked frequencies. They say once the full sound is spoken aloud again, even once, the illusion that cages humanity will shatter, and the architects of silence know they won't be able to stop it. That is why suppression is escalating. That is why people searching for the name disappear without a trace. They are desperate because they know the tide is turning. The sound of the beginning is rising again, and nothing they built to erase it can hold forever. His name won't appear on any database now, not the real story, but before the blackout, fragments of his journey leaked, enough to piece together what happened to him. We'll call him Elias, a quiet man, a researcher of ancient linguistics with no ties to conspiracy or faith movements, no agenda beyond a deep and gnawing hunger for something unnamed. Friends described him as obsessed with sounds no one else could hear. He'd stop mid-sentence, one colleague recalled, and tilt his head like the air was singing to him, like he was listening to a voice beyond our range. For years, Elias chased what he called the origin tone, a frequency he claimed was older than words, older than humanity itself. He traveled through deserts where ruins still whispered in the wind, to Himalayan monasteries where monks kept chants passed orally through generations, to Amazon tribes whose songs had never been recorded. And then one day something changed. The first anomaly was small. A recording he made of a forgotten Aramaic prayer triggered strange reactions in anyone who listened. People reported feeling weightless, as if the boundaries of their bodies dissolved for a moment, as if the earth itself breathed through them. Elias knew it was only a fragment, but it was enough to confirm his fear. The name was real, and it wanted to be remembered. Soon after, his life turned into a sequence of inexplicable events. Birds gathered outside his window every dawn, not singing, just watching. Electronics malfunctioned near him. Phones crackled with static. Lights flickered as if something unseen passed through them. Strangers approached him on trains and streets, saying they dreamt of him, dreamt of a sound he carried but had not yet spoken. And then came the warnings. Anonymous emails, unmarked cars following him. A voice message left on his phone, distorted but chillingly clear. Stop before it's too late. Some doors were sealed for a reason. But Elias didn't stop. He was convinced that humanity's suffering, the emptiness, the endless wars, the spiritual amnesia, all stemmed from this severance, from forgetting the name that once aligned us with creation. If even one person remembers it, he told a friend, this world will never be the same. That friend never saw him again. The last trace of Elias surfaced in a 14-minute audio file uploaded to a hidden forum. In it, he sounds terrified, whispering that he has found the final syllable, that the name is whole again. He describes standing in a cave somewhere in the Middle East, walls covered in symbols pulsing with faint light. The air isn't air, he says in the recording. It's alive, it's listening, it knows I'm here. When I hum the tone, the stone breathes back. This is it. This is the sound that made the stars. The recording ends abruptly, with what can only be described as a resonant blast. Not a noise, but a living sound. Deep and unearthly, that seems to bend the audio itself. Seconds later, silence. Elias was never heard from again. Witnesses in nearby villages reported strange phenomena that same night. Lights in the sky, a tremor in the ground without seismic cause, animals gathering silently and staring toward the hills. Military vehicles were seen moving in the area the next morning, sealing off access. Official reports said nothing happened. But those who heard the last seconds of that recording swear it did something to them. A memory they never had returning, a weight lifting from their hearts, a knowing that everything about the world we've been taught is incomplete, a shadow of a greater truth long denied. Elias may have been silenced, but the sound he awakened could not be unmade, and that terrifies the architects more than anything else. After Elias vanished, the fragments he had gathered did not vanish with him. Hidden copies of his research surfaced in encrypted forums, shared like contraband between seekers who understood the danger but couldn't resist the pull. Among these fragments were tonal notations, strange sequences of sounds no human language could shape fully, like keys to a door no one alive had ever seen. A small circle of people scattered across continents began working in secret to reconstruct the name. They were not priests or mystics, just ordinary men and women driven by a feeling they couldn't explain, as if something beyond them demanded to be spoken. They met online, coded messages exchanged in the dead of night, discussing frequencies, dream visitations, symbols from forgotten texts, and slowly, painfully, they came closer to the lost sound, a word not meant to be read, only breathed, sung like a bridge between the human and the eternal. The first attempt happened in a basement in Prague, where 4 of them gathered with crude recording equipment, candles flickering as if caught in a wind no one could feel. A witness described it later in a trembling voice. "It didn't feel like we were making a sound. It felt like the sound was making us. Our throats burned, our lungs felt too small. And then the walls disappeared. For a moment we were standing under a sky that wasn't Earth's, stars like fire pouring downward. We all knew the same thing at once. This wasn't just a name, it was remembering what we are." But the ecstasy turned to terror. As the final syllable left their lips, the candles exploded into sparks, and the room plunged into darkness. When the lights returned, one of them was gone. Not dead, not there, simply gone, as if the sound had erased him from the world. His name never appeared on missing person reports. It was as though he had never existed. Others tried, with different pieces of the sound. In a forest in Brazil, 3 seekers chanted a reconstructed fragment said to align human vibration with the original frequency. Nearby villagers claimed the air shimmered like heat waves, and a thunderous hum rolled through the trees without wind or storm. When the group emerged, their eyes were wild, their voices gone. They never spoke again, not because they refused, but because they couldn't. Something had taken their words, as if using the fragments without permission came at a cost. The most chilling account came from an underground facility in Eastern Europe, allegedly funded by an unnamed private entity. Scientists and spiritual practitioners collaborated to reproduce the sound using machines, believing that a synthetic version would bypass the risk of direct utterance. Witnesses claimed that when they played the final prototype, every instrument in the lab shattered. The researchers were found on their knees, weeping, whispering the same phrase over and over, "We are not what they told us." The experiment was classified instantly, equipment destroyed, survivors disappeared into silence. Whispers say the reason these attempts fail is because the name cannot be approached like a formula, cannot be forced or reconstructed mechanically. It is not a sound to be possessed, but a living bridge that only opens when the heart is aligned with the source itself. The architects of silence know this, which is why they try to erase every clue before anyone remembers how to truly receive it. Yet each failed attempt leaves an imprint, a ripple in human consciousness. More people dream the same dreams now. More hearts ache with a longing they can't explain. The sound is stirring, again waiting for a moment when fear no longer keeps it from being sung aloud. But the question remains, who will dare to speak it first, knowing what it costs to try? They have watched the tide turning, and they are terrified. For centuries, control was effortless, a script handed down generation to generation, making you believe obedience was virtue, silence was holiness, and fear of the divine was the only proper relationship to it. But now, the cracks are widening. Too many are dreaming the same dreams. Too many are feeling something ancient stirring inside, as if the frequency of creation itself is rising through the static of this artificial world they built. The architects of silence cannot allow this. Their power depends on the great forgetting. If even one person remembers the full name, the illusion collapses, and they will no longer be gods, kings, rulers. They will be nothing. And so, their plan is no longer passive suppression. They are moving toward what insiders call the second veil, a global initiative designed to cut humanity off from the source forever. Leaked documents, though swiftly erased from public record, describe a technology already in place in major cities. Towers emitting subharmonic frequencies tuned to drown out what they call non-authorized resonance. In simple words, they are trying to overwrite the human soul's antenna, replacing the natural vibration of your being with an artificial hum that keeps you numb, obedient, forgetful. One whistleblower described it this way: "We built a net over the earth. Anything that tries to reach you from beyond the script gets scrambled before you can feel it." But this is only one layer of their plan. Religious institutions are being primed to deliver what they call the final doctrine, a narrative that brands any attempt to recall the name as heresy, madness, even terrorism. They are preparing to turn brother against brother, to make remembering the most dangerous act a human can commit. New laws are being drafted under the guise of safety, banning unregulated sound experiments, criminalizing gatherings where chants or alternative prayers are spoken. The architects are weaving fear into every ear they can reach, whispering the same lie they've told for millennia: there is nothing beyond what we give you. Anything else is darkness. And then there is the darkest part of the plan. It is not enough for them to suppress the name. They intend to counterfeit it. Hidden. Laboratories are working on what insiders call the false sound, an artificial frequency designed to mimic awakening while binding the soul tighter to their system. They know humanity is searching, aching to remember, so they will offer a substitute, a sound that feels divine, feels liberating, yet enslaves more deeply than before. One source claimed, when they release it, millions will kneel willingly, believing they've found truth, but it will only deepen the prison. This counterfeit is almost ready, and when it's unleashed, those who have heard even fragments of the true name will face a choice more dangerous than silence: speak the real sound and risk everything, or be swept into the grand deception that will chain humanity for another 1,000 years. This is the hour they feared most, the moment when they are no longer hunters of truth, but prey hunted by truth itself. Their desperation is the greatest proof that the name is close, closer than it has been in millennia. Unisuri, feel it, don't you? That pulse beneath the noise of the world, that whisper in your bones that you were meant for more than this. That is why they tighten their grip. That is why the net grows thicker every day. They are racing against something inevitable, the return of the sound of the beginning, and they will burn the world if necessary to keep it from reaching your lips. It happened not with trumpets, not with fire falling from the sky, but in a whisper carried by the wind, soft enough to be mistaken for a dream. Somewhere someone spoke it, the true name whole and unbroken, and the universe itself trembled to remember. No recording captured it, no machine could hold it, but those tuned to the ache in their own souls felt it like a shockwave of light bursting through their ribs, an uncontainable knowing that burned away centuries of lies in a single heartbeat. A woman in Cairo dropped to her knees in the middle of a crowded market, tears streaming down her face as memories she never lived filled her mind. A garden before time, a voice humming stars into being, a love too vast to die. A boy in New York stopped mid-step, frozen, whispering a sound he had never heard, yet somehow had always known. A syllable that made strangers around him feel the ground breathing beneath their feet. All over the earth, hearts skipped, eyes widened. People forgot who they had been told to be. Those who heard it said it wasn't a word, not in any human tongue. It was a frequency that bypassed thought and went straight to the essence of being, pulling you back to a place before fear, before division, before the prison of forgetting was built around your mind. One survivor of that moment described it like this: it was a sound that didn't travel through air but through soul. It said without language, "You are not lost. You are never broken. You are the breath that made the worlds." And in that instant, everything I believed about weakness, about sin, about being small, it shattered like glass. Millions felt it at once, yet no two stories were the same. It was personal, intimate, like the Creator leaning close and calling you home by name. The architects felt it too. Their towers flickered, their false frequencies cracked like thin ice. Panic spread through their ranks, whispered orders flying across hidden channels. Contain it, suppress it, distract them before it roots. But it was too late. A seed had been planted in human hearts that could not be uprooted. Even those who didn't consciously hear the sound sensed a shift, like the script of reality faltered for a fraction of a second, like chains they couldn't see had loosened. People looked at the world with strange eyes that day, eyes that questioned, eyes that saw the bars of their invisible cages. The system was bleeding and they knew it, yet the name came with a weight no one had expected. To hear it was not just to remember freedom. It was to feel the pain of every moment humanity had lived under the lie. It was to sense the centuries of silence, the cries of souls chained by fear, the deep wound of separation from what had always been ours. Many collapsed under the truth of it, sobbing as if lifetimes of grief poured out of them all at once. A man in India wrote on a wall before vanishing forever, "The name breaks you to make you whole. It is fire. It burns the false self to ashes. There is no going back." And still, not everyone received it. The counterfeit sound had already begun its work, wrapping millions in a comforting echo of false light, making them believe they'd found the divine while pulling them deeper into sleep. The real name was too raw, too wild, too uncontrollable to appeal to those trained to worship cages. This was no god you could bargain with, no deity you could fear into serving. This was the origin, untamed, the heartbeat of creation itself, a sound that offered only truth, and truth demands everything. For those who heard it, there was no choice anymore. Something awakened that would never sleep again. A quiet rebellion began in hearts across the world, not of violence, but of unshakable knowing. The architects felt their empire crumbling beneath them, and somewhere, perhaps in another cave, another desert, another forgotten ruin, someone whispered the name again and the fabric of the world trembled once more. Is this story resonating with you? Leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Now let's continue. And now, as the world steadies itself in the aftermath, something has shifted forever. You feel it, don't you? The air carries a different weight, as if every breath you take hums faintly with that forbidden sound, though you cannot quite form it on your lips. You look at the sky and wonder if the stars have always pulsed like this, if the moon has always seemed to listen, if the earth beneath your feet has always known your name. A strange silence blankets the world, not the oppressive silence they built, but an expectant stillness, like the moment before a dawn no one thought would come. People meet each other's eyes differently now, sensing something unspoken shared between strangers, a flicker of memory, a hint of light long hidden, a knowing that refuses to die again. The architects scramble to patch the cracks in their empire, but the illusion bleeds too much. Something ancient is awake inside you, inside all of us, and no tower, no script, no counterfeit god can put it back to sleep. But what do you do with a truth this vast, this unbearable? It doesn't hand you instructions, doesn't tell you what comes next. It only unmasks the lie, tears apart the chains, and leaves you standing before an open door that terrifies you as much as it calls you. To speak the name aloud now feels dangerous, not because they will punish you, but because you know the price. The burning away of everything false inside you, the ending of who you thought you were. Yet some nights, when the world is quiet and you're alone with your heartbeat, you swear you hear it again, faint but undeniable, a note that doesn't come from outside but from within, as if creation itself is breathing through you, waiting for you to answer, waiting for you to remember fully. There are whispers of gatherings in forgotten places, no cameras, no broadcasts, only souls daring to stand in the raw presence of what's real. They do not try to recreate the sound. They know now it is not something you make, but something you become. They wait in stillness, hearts stripped bare, and sometimes, just sometimes, the air trembles, and the name speaks itself through them, wordless, boundless, infinite, and for a heartbeat, the world is whole again. These moments do not make the news, but they ripple across the earth, rewriting unseen scripts, loosening invisible chains. The architects feel it, panic deepening, their controls slipping like sand through clenched fists. But they can do nothing to stop it now, because this truth is no longer hidden in caves or manuscripts. It's alive in you. And maybe that is the real secret they feared, the truth buried beneath centuries of programming and fear, that the divine name of creation was never lost, only silenced. It has been written in your bones since the beginning, waiting for the moment you would refuse to forget. They built empires on the lie that you are powerless, broken, separated from the source. But you are the sound of the beginning. You always were. You always will be. So as you sit here with this forbidden story burning in your mind, I will ask you one last question. If you dared to speak the real name, if you let it rise from the deepest part of you, knowing it would burn every falsehood away, would you do it? Would you trade the comfort of the cage for the terrifying freedom of truth? Have you ever done something kind that changed a life forever? Tell me in the comments. And if this story made you feel something, share it with someone who needs to remember who they are.